How's it going, guys? It's Najam. Welcome back to another video. So in this video I'm gonna finally review the Tuxedo Computers Gemini 17 Gen 3 AMD. Now this is a workstation laptop. It's a desktop replacement. It has quite a lot of CPU power as well as GPU power. In fact, the CPU as well as the GPU inside this laptop is actually from a desktop. So they're using desktop parts in this laptop, and it does have a lot of performance. We're going to get into the benchmarks for the GPU as well as the CPU, and there is quite a lot to talk about. So I'll try not waste time. This video might be very long. So let's get started. Now I will start off with the specifications. So this has the Ryzen 9 7945HX, which has 16 cores and 32 threads. I'll talk more about the CPU later on. Now I've opted for the RTX 4060 8GB because there isn't really a point in getting the RTX 4070 on laptops. You can configure this up to 96GB of RAM. I've gone with 64GB running at 5600 MHz. It does have two PCIe slots for SSDs and storage on the inside. I've gone with a single 2TB SSD for everything that I need on this. And it comes with Intel Wi-Fi 6E AX210, which has Wi-Fi 2.4, 5 and 6 GHz, as well as Bluetooth 5.3. The Gemini 17 Gen 3 has a 73 watt of a battery inside, and it works with a 230 watt power supply. You do also have 100 watt Type-C charging, which I'll show you in just a moment. And my configuration cost £1,750, that is including tax. So it does calculate for just a little bit over than the Series 16.1, which is a full AMD machine from Tuxedo Computers, but with this laptop you're getting twice the CPU performance. So we'll start by taking a look at the left side. You do have a Kensington lock right over there at the corner. You have some ventilation, and it does have a USB Type A 3.2 Gen 1, which is running at 5 gigabits per second, and it also has a 2-in-1 audio in jack, so this is a headset jack. On the right side, you have a USB 3.2 Gen 2 slot, which is running at 10 gigabits per second. You also have a Type-C 3.2 Gen 2. So this port has power delivery in, and it also has 5 volts 3 amps output. So you can actually plug your devices into this, and it can provide more power than a usual USB port. Now, unfortunately, this does not have the DisplayPort protocol, so you will not be able to use this for video out. Now on the back you do have more ventilation, and you also have a mini DisplayPort 1.4, which is hardwired to the dedicated GPU, and this has G-Sync. You also have a RJ45 1 gigabit. You have a HDMI 2.1, which is also hardwired to the dedicated GPU. Now this does have G-Sync as well as HDCP 2.3. You have the DC in. And then you also have a USB Type-C 3.2 Gen 2. Now this is hardwired to the integrated GPU, and this has DisplayPort 1.4a, and so that means you can output a display on this. It does not have a power delivery in from the rear port, unfortunately, but it does have the DC out, so you can output 15 watts of power, which is 5 volts 3 amps. Now for the display out, I've mainly been using this USB Type-C port because it's very convenient. When you open the laptop, as you can see, it does not lift up, so you can open it without having to worry about the laptop lifting off the table. So this laptop has a full keyboard, as you can see, and you can pick so many different keyboard layouts. Now there is one thing I want to mention about this keyboard. It doesn't have a caps lock indicator, as neither does it have a number lock indicator, which is quite interesting because they've gotten rid of that. I've seen in the Aura 15 Gen 2, and there's no indication for that, and that is been a bit annoying. The touchpad, on the other hand, is a huge improvement. It is huge. It is really big. It's the size of my whole hand, and I do find it very nice to use. I have no complaints about it, except that I do want it a little bit on the right, because when I'm doing some gaming, it does actually activate with my palm, and that is a little bit annoying. And while we're here, let's go ahead and talk about the build quality. Now the lid on this laptop is built out of aluminium, but the rest of the laptop is actually built out of plastic. The display frame is out of plastic, as well as this, and also the complete bottom end over here is built out of plastic, and it does feel really well built and put together, but it's not premium materials, so build quality is actually pretty nice because it feels very sturdy. It doesn't flex or anything. It's very good in that sense, but it is built out of plastic. Okay, let's talk about the display. This is a 17.3 inch IPS display. It has a resolution of 2560 by 1440. So it has an aspect ratio of 16:9. Now this display does have a color gamut of 100% DCI-P3, which is amazing because it makes a huge difference in the colors. And because this display looks so good, I've not been able to use any of the other displays because the colors are so rich on this display. This display is running at 165 Hz, and I will show you the options for the other outputs. It's a LED backlit display and it does have a matte finish. The brightness is about 300 nits and the contrast ratio is 1000:1. So it's an IPS display. It does have AMD FreeSync and it opens maximum up to 130 degrees, which is a little bit different, a little bit of a letdown compared to the Order 15 because that could go to 180 degrees, which is completely flat. The resolution on this display is plenty. It is very comfortable to edit videos on this as well as multitask with multiple applications. Now on the keyboard down here you do have the option to actually turn the backlight off. Now this is a big and heavy laptop. It's very big. It feels more like a very compact desktop, and it is very heavy as well, and it's also quite big. So unlike a lot of lightweight laptops, this is not going to be as easy to carry around. The laptop itself weighs 2.8 kilograms, but with the power brick, it actually comes more closer to 4 kilograms. So this whole package here may be a desktop replacement, but you're going to be carrying almost 4 kgs in your backpack. Now I've gotten used to it because in my youth I can actually carry this around, but even then I have found it very annoying, and instead I end up carrying my backpack in my hands rather than having it on my back. So that is a bit of a difference. Okay, now let's talk about some features I like about this laptop. If you go into the BIOS, you can actually go into dedicated GPU mode. So this has 2 GPUs, but you can disable the integrated graphics card and you can use this with only the nvidia card. Now from my experience I don't recommend it, but you can do that if that's what you want. Another cool thing is the RTX 4060 and also the other 40 series GPUs do have the AV1 encoder. The AMD cards don't have that, so that's been quite a bit of difference. I've been able to use the AV1 encoder and it is really efficient. So let's talk about the CPU. Now this has a 16-core Ryzen 9 7945HX CPU and it has 32 threads. As you can see on the display, they're sitting idle. Now the Ryzen 7000HX CPUs from my research are basically desktop dies that are just used in laptops. In other words, you're getting desktop class performance in this laptop. And not only that, this does have full power 16 cores, which will destroy so many CPUs out there. The performance from this CPU does rival some server CPUs from Intel and AMD that have 32 cores and 64 threads. So the performance on this CPU is really high. Now I don't like the behavior on this CPU. From my research, I've found that it's actually designed to overclock and boost itself as much as it can until it hits about 97 or 95 degrees Celsius. Now this is just the way that CPUs are designed, and AMD's designed them this way to get the best performance out of these CPUs. I decided I'm going to limit it using the overclocking facilities in the BIOS to 90 degrees Celsius, and I managed that really well. It only goes up to 90 degrees Celsius and the performance is basically the same. Now if you do look at the numbers, there is a tiny little drop in performance. But with this CPU, you're getting so much performance anyways. It's like a needle in a haystack. Even when encoding video in kdenlive at Ultra HD 25 FPS, I've never really managed to hit 100, even 50% of the CPU utilization. But it does consume a lot of power and it does go up to 90 watts. Now I did finally manage to actually get the CPU to 100%. And it did consume 93 watts, and this was when it was encoding multiple, I believe about 20 different MPEG-2 proxies for my video work, and it did go to 100% usage, but it finished very quickly, so that was pretty nice. Now let's talk about the benchmarks. Now I've been recording all the kdenlive renders, so I've been encoding so many different videos, and I've been just using hardware encoding as well as GPU encoding, and I've started using the nvidia H.264 encoder. It does use the CPU and it does encode faster, so I've been using that, but the performance on this CPU is very hard to beat. You can see the results and it renders videos really quickly. Now keep in mind I am using kdenlive, which doesn't use all of the resources available, but with what I've managed, this is exceptionally fast rendering speed. So let's talk about the benchmarks. We'll start off with Sysbench, and I'll just put these on the screen. I did actually limit the cooling to 50%, and I did run the benchmark, the CPU speed, and it did drop by like a couple of thousand points, and that is a big difference. But since then I've actually updated back to just full load, so I've taken all limits off, and the events per second on this CPU on the Sysbench is 87,000, which is quite a lot of power. And I also ran some Geekbench benchmarks. I tested the CPU, which as far as my knowledge goes, this Tuxedo computer's laptop managed the highest score from any of the others I've seen on Geekbench using this CPU. So I got single core score of 2829, and I got a multi-core score of 17,665. Now I also ran some Geekbench GPU tests, and the RTX 4060 inside this laptop scored 97,928, and the little baby 610M inside the Ryzen CPU gave a score of 7,612. So for the past few months I've had this laptop, I've actually not managed to bottleneck the CPU at all. Yes, it goes to 100% usage when it's doing so much, but it doesn't slow down at all. The operating system still feels really fast. And there's not really a point in going over some of the benchmarks, partly because I haven't really run them and I can't be bothered, but really there's no point. This CPU I have not been able to bottleneck at all, so we're gonna move on to some gaming performance. Now if you're a subscriber to my channel, you probably know that I bought this to stream as well as do gameplay at the same time. So one machine to encode 2 video clips, one for live streaming, one for recording at different bit rates, and also playing a AAA title at the same time with multiple windows open on the displays. So it does require quite a lot of horsepower, and I've been doing gaming on the RTX 4060. Now just a quick note, if you do run this laptop on battery power, the RTX 4060 is going to be limited to 25 watts. As far as gaming goes, this does have an RTX 4060, and you're gonna get the performance of RTX 4060 from this. It does have the 140 watt variant, so you're gonna get the maximum power going to the GPU. If you look at NVTop, you'll notice it dynamically changes from 25 watts when it's running on battery power to 115 watts and also 140 watts as well. And the maximum I've seen this GPU use is 116 watts, and that's when it's being utilized 100% and encoding at the same time. So the RTX 4060 can only really pull 100 watts to the GPU die, and it's limited that way. That's why there's no point getting the RTX 4070. But when you're using the built-in encoders at the same time, it does increase by 15 watts because the encoders do use 15 watts when it's encoding video. So the total has been 116. Now I bought this for gaming as well as rendering videos and all the work stuff that I need to do. Now I intended on buying this for 1080p gaming, and the RTX 4060 can do that no problem, but it can also do 1440p with medium settings. So I've been gaming on this in 1440p and it does look much better than 1080p. Now let's go and look at the display output resolution options. Now you'll notice it runs all the other resolutions at 165 Hz. There is one exception, and that is 1440p at 60 Hz as well. So you do have two options, 165 Hz or 60 Hz. And I do recommend using 60 Hz when you're gaming, because the RTX 4060, the 4070 as well as the 4080 and the 4090 on the laptops, they're not going to be able to push this resolution at 165 FPS. You can either lower the resolution or, in my opinion, use FSR, which is what I've been doing. And you can even play on battery power if your game does have FSR, and it can play at really low resolution. You will get ray tracing, but you will be able to get a playable good experience. But yes, it does have 60 Hz mode, and I do recommend that for gaming. It also has a TPM 2.0 chip, so it will support Windows 11 as well as any other future version of Windows until Microsoft decides to play a different game. Now in the BIOS you can disable the Wi-Fi, the Bluetooth the webcam as well as the audio, and you can disable all that from the BIOS. So that's pretty nice. As far as security goes, that's a nice feature. So I've tried to manage my best to get this to be as quiet as possible because the built-in fans are very loud. This is the built-in webcam, and you can see it's really wide. This is such a wide webcam. It's very useful for meetings and also whatever you need it for. This runs at 1080p 30 fps and also 720p 60 fps, so it's a bit of an improvement over the previous laptop I had, and it's actually pretty good. I've been using it sometimes as a webcam in the corner of my videos for live streaming and also gameplay, and when you're looking at this full screen it doesn't look good at all, but when you're looking at it, when it's really small, it actually looks pretty good. It's also rectilinear, so there's no distortion. Now it does also have a privacy cover, and that's pretty nice. So what you're listening to right now are the built-in microphones in this laptop, and this is how they sound. I'm not going to be impressed. They're probably going to sound really bad, but if you do some noise editing and stuff like that, you might be able to get some sort of usable audio from this. Now this laptop also has pretty good speakers in my opinion. Now I know they're not the best, but they're quite usable. So this has two speakers, both of them are 2 watts each, one on the left side and one on the right side.
Hey, if you want to look anywhere else out there, now's the time to do it. Right. Look, for what it's worth, it's your kick-ass reputation that got you this job. Plus, I figured you could use the money. Well, what's wrong? Honestly, though, it's actually nice working with a woman for a change. Too rot. Not many of us out here.
Now speaking about the battery life, this has a 73 watt hour battery inside, and because this has a dedicated GPU, you're only gonna get about 1 hour at best, which is absolute garbage. Now from my experience, what I found is that the battery life is pretty small, but it might not be because of the dedicated GPU, because it's running at 3 watts idle. The CPU on the other hand can use up to like 35 watts under load, so I'm assuming it's the CPU that's consuming all the battery. Okay, now it's time for the pros and cons. I'll talk about what I like about this and what I dislike about this. So I do love the performance. Obviously you have so many cores to work with, as well as a really nice GPU, and I have shown that this can do quite a lot at the same time, because this is a workstation laptop, so it will do a lot. It is a very fast laptop. Most of the time it just seems like it's in idle because there's so much headroom. And I also do like the display. The colors are very nice. It's basically on par with an OLED display. The only thing that gives it away is the backlight bleeding from the IPS panel, but apart from that, it's a very nice display. It's actually one of the best displays I've seen, and it's one of the best displays that I do have on me right now. Okay, let's talk about what I dislike about this laptop. Now I wasn't expecting this, but the fan noise on this laptop is just an abomination. It has really loud fans, and I'm not gonna give anybody an excuse saying that there's a lot of wind that's moving and that's making all the swooshy sound. It's not. It's actually the fans. They are just very loud. In my opinion, it's just a really poor design to cool a laptop. I'm sure there's a more efficient way. Now I did get in touch with Tuxedo computers about the cooling, and unfortunately, in my opinion, what I found is that the cooling efficiency in this laptop is actually pretty poor, especially given that it has a 16-core CPU. I thought they would have done much more. They've not used anything special. They've used a normal thermal paste. Neither have they used a really good thermal paste. They just a boring off-the-shelf thermal paste, and it also doesn't really have a very good cooling efficiency. From my experience, it's not a very efficient way of cooling this laptop. Now you can do a custom curve on Tuxedo Control Center, which has been a godsend, because I've limited the fans to 50%, and it seems pretty cool. Now at 50% fan speed is pretty nice to use. With the fans at 20% it's basically silent, and at 30% is quiet, at 40% is audible, and at 50% it does get a little bit annoying, but if you put headphones on it's not an issue. Now anything above 60% in my opinion is just too loud, and because I am recording with this thing, when it's at 50% you can actually hear the distortion and the muffledness in the sound because of noise reduction, so I do like to keep it more quiet. The other thing I don't like about this laptop is actually the I/O. I wish it had more USB ports. I know there's like 3 on the side, but 2 of them are USB Type-C, or they're not as useful to me as full-size A ports. But to conclude, it is a very nice machine. It does cost quite a lot, and it does perform as well. Now that being said, I know this is only for a niche market, because it just, in my opinion, has way too much CPU power. From my use case, I've really just managed at most 50%, and I think it would be better if you just got something with half as many cores and with more GPU power, because I did intend on using this to encode multiple streams at the same time, but I realized that it does have an iGPU as well as a dedicated GPU, and both of those GPUs have encoders inside, and I've been using them encoders, and it's basically, that means the CPU has been sitting idle even when I'm live streaming. So yeah, it does have a lot of CPU power, and it does come in handy when you're doing so many things. But even with 8 cores, you're getting quite a lot of performance. I mean, yeah, sure, there are so many other laptops, but this does have that CPU performance, and that's the big selling point of this laptop. Now, if you do have any questions, if there's anything I missed out, ask me in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys in another video.